Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Ancient Garbage Dump. Archaeologists in Egypt have discovered an ancient garbage dump inside a temple dedicated to one of the most powerful female rulers in history. The garbage dump was uncovered in the Hathor cult complex, a massive three-temple structure inside the larger Hatshepsut Temple near Luxor. These temples date back 3,500 years, back to the rule of Pharaoh Hatshepsut. What's really interesting is that the garbage dump proved to be filled with artifacts, things that people thought were just pieces of garbage thousands of years ago. Most of the artifacts discovered here date back to the New Kingdom, from between the 16th century and 11th century B.C. What this means is that even though the garbage dump was made several thousand years earlier, people used it more heavily later. It was filled with objects that researchers say were probably left for deities by pilgrims who traveled from far and wide to honor the goddess of fertility. What were these offerings doing in the trash? That's where things get really bizarre and maybe a little familiar. The offerings were mostly given in honor of the goddess of fertility Hathor. But this part of the temple wasn't for worship, but a separate place to dump trash. Pilgrims and devotees probably brought all kinds of useless pieces of junk as votive offerings to Hathor. Then when they left, anything that wasn't worth keeping was thrown in the rubbish pile by the ruling priests. Number 9. Drugs for power. A new discovery has proved that ancient Peruvian elites likely used alcohol and drugs to control their empires. A new study has revealed that for centuries, the ancient Wadi who ruled the highlands of Peru from between 600 to 1000 used a mixture of drugs and beer to maintain political influence for centuries. The discovery comes in the form of a tree, a psychotropic tree found in an old Wari brewery. Archaeologists now believe the Wadi combined intoxicants from the tree with those they already used in an alcoholic drink called chicha. The combination would have taken the drink from an alcohol content of about 5% and turned it into what was basically an acid trip. It was archaeologists with the Royal Ontario Museum who made this shocking and bizarre discovery at a former Wadi village called Quilcapampa. They uncovered hallucinogenic vilca seeds from the tree. The experts now theorize that the Wadi used their hybrid drink to make friends with chieftains and rulers all throughout their kingdom. They consolidated power over them by manipulating them with drugs, and back in those days would have been considered a spiritual journey. The drink would have given an out-of-body experience, which would have allowed everyone participating to form extreme bonds that just otherwise wouldn't have been possible. During that time, the ones with this drink had the power, since it made everyone believe they must be closer to the spiritual realm. Number 8. The oldest dog tooth. Archaeologists have uncovered the tooth of the oldest known domesticated dog in the Americas. It happened in the last place you might imagine, at the Haida Gwaii archipelago off the north coast of British Columbia in Canada. Archaeological investigations here have uncovered ancient human settlements from 15,000 years ago. Back then, this wasn't an archipelago, but just another part of the mainland. This means much of the coastline is now submerged, and many of the settlements where some of the earliest North Americans lived are lost underwater. Archaeologists excavated limestone caves in the area. They discovered a fossil record inside 3 caves dating back from between around 14,500 and 11,000 years ago. They found bones from brown bears, deer, caribou, and fish. They also found that many of the bones had been gnawed on by some kind of carnivore. Not only that, but they recovered ancient spear tips used by hunters and stone tools. And in one of the caves, they found the tooth of a domesticated dog that lived approximately 13,100 years ago. This is a lot to unpack at once. The point is that the dog tooth seems to be direct evidence that humans brought domestic dogs with them when they migrated to North America. This is the oldest proof we have now of this theory. It's also quite interesting because most of these kinds of discoveries happen in the United States, but this happened far in the Canadian North, where the original migration to America would have happened before the ending of the Ice Age. Number 7. 2 giant sphinxes. In the ruins of an old pharaoh's temple, 2 giant sphinxes have been uncovered for the first time in thousands of years. The Sphinx is a mythical beast with the head of a person, the body of a lion, and the wings of a falcon. And while the Great Sphinx in Giza is definitely the most famous, there are plenty of examples of these strange monsters to be found all over Egypt. These newest statues, new in the sense that they were just found, are colossal. They were built of limestone and likely intended to depict an ancient pharaoh. They are so massive that it's a wonder they weren't discovered earlier. One of them reaches a height of over 26 feet. It was only revealed thanks to new restoration work being done on the statues of Memnon in Luxor at the Temple of Millions of Years. This temple is a vast complex that was dedicated to King Amenhotep III, sometimes called Amenhotep the Magnificent. He ruled Egypt in the 14th century B.C. in what is known today as the Golden Age of Egypt. This was when the old empire was at its height of international influence. The colossal limestone statues seem to depict the great pharaoh himself. He must have had his builders carve his face onto the huge Sphinx statues, immortalizing him for eternity. Number 6. A very old penny. A 16-year-old kid accidentally became an archaeologist thanks to an artifact he found in his lunch money. Don Lutz Jr. from Massachusetts purchased lunch at his school cafeteria in 1947. At the time, the kid didn't think anything of the change given by his school chef. He had a handful of copper pennies, and that was good enough for him. What he did notice was that one of the copper coins was colored a little differently than the others. This was what made him hold on to the penny. 72 years after buying lunch at school, Don still had the discolored penny. And as it turned out, it was one of only 20 copper coins accidentally minted as part of a manufacturing error during World War II. At that time, the U.S. Mint was pressing coins made of zinc-plated steel rather than copper because copper was being rationed for wartime materials. Copper was needed for things like shell casings and telephone wire. Experts believe only 10 to 15 of the 20 coins still survive today, and Don had one collecting dust in his house for almost 80 years. It was his descendant who realized how much the coin was worth and decided to put it up for auction. It sold for over $204,000, attracting 30 bids. How much would you pay for a rare coin? Let me know in the comments below. Number 5. Ancient drinking straws. Researchers with the Russian Academy of Sciences have identified the world's first drinking straws. The straws themselves were actually found in a burial mound in 1897 during early excavations of a Bronze Age site in the Caucasus. The straws couldn't be identified when they were first found. Archaeologists thought they were just strange, long silver and gold tubes with no real purpose. They dated them as being over 5,000 years old, then just kind of stashed them away in the archive. Only now have researchers taken a good look at straws and figured out what they were used for. The tubes, each one about 3 feet long, were used as part of a bizarre ceremony. People participating in the ceremony were given enormous straws to drink beer out of a huge communal vessel. Imagine if you and your friends went to a bar and you only got one giant tub of beer and all of you had to drink out of it with straws longer than your legs. This is more or less what was going on. Experts don't know exactly what kind of ceremonies involved everyone drinking beer out of a massive vessel, but they must have been pretty important. Number 4. An ancient toy. In the ancient city of Gdansk in Poland, archaeologists were excavating a very old latrine, which doesn't usually make headlines. But there is always the chance of finding something unexpected when looking at ancient bathrooms. The team got a little surprised when they found an object shaped like a phallus, which they believe may have been used as an adult toy 250 years ago. Oh my! Because of where it was found and the material it was made out of, archaeologists don't think it was used in religious rituals or left as an offering for a god. Archaeologists were looking at an old school of swordsmanship and determined the relic was made in the second half of the 1700s. There is no arguing what it was made to look like: the male reproductive organ. Archaeologists measured it at 8 inches long and discovered it was made from leather and filled with bristles. It's definitely one of the weirder artifacts found at the site, where previously archaeologists have found things like wooden swords used for military training, pieces of pottery, and even jewelry. As for what the object was doing dumped in an old latrine, that's anybody's guess. A spokesman for the Regional Office for the Protection of Monuments said the object may have been dropped by accident while somebody was using it, or discarded to get rid of the evidence. Whatever the case, whoever had been using the toy must have been wealthy. It was made of the highest quality leather, so it was likely pretty expensive. And considering this was the 1700s, it was also probably quite hard to come by. Representations of the phallus have been around for thousands of years, dating back to the Paleolithic Era. During Roman times, phallic imagery was everywhere, as not only was it erotic, but it was used in people's everyday life to ward off evil forces. How did it work? The idea was that a bizarre phallic form was so weird that it immediately drew the gaze of the evil eye, and thus protected vulnerable people from its wrath. Number 3. Mammoth Graveyard. In Britain, experts have unearthed an exceptionally bizarre graveyard, not of humans, but of mammoths. They found the remains of 5 ancient woolly mammoths from 200,000 years ago at a quarry, 2 adults, 2 juveniles, and a baby mammoth. The dig began after a pair of fossil hunters accidentally came across the hand axe of a Neanderthal. Officials with dig ventures then got involved and began excavating the entire quarry, at which point they found the huge burial complex filled with mammoth bones. They also identified multiple stone tools used by the Neanderthals. The findings by themselves aren't that unique, but together paint a rather exceptional picture. Researchers are now trying to figure out why so many mammoths were discovered in one place, although most think they already have the answer. Considering all the Neanderthal tools nearby, it makes sense that these animals were hunted by prehistoric humans and then butchered for their meat and hides. The Neanderthals then dumped whatever they couldn't use into one giant pit. Either that, or the Neanderthals came upon the graveyard by accident and scavenged what they could from the already dead animals and just left their stone tools behind. Which one do you think it was? Let me know in the comments below. Number 2. Portrait of Jesus. Archaeologists have found a very old wall painting of a young Jesus Christ in an abandoned church in Israel. The wall painting dates back 1,500 years and was found in the ruined structure of a Byzantine church in the middle of the sun-scorched Negev desert. The ruins of the church are nothing new. Archaeologists have known about this place for at least 150 years. But it wasn't until just recently that researchers finally identified the very faint image of the shockingly youthful Messiah on the wall. His face had been right there looking at archaeologists for decades, but nobody had ever figured out who he was. It was art historian Maayan-Fanar who finally realized the painting depicts Christ. The ruins of the church were first discovered in 1871 in the abandoned farming village Shifta. This place peaked in the 6th century, but was active for 650 years before that. The painting was found above the baptismal font, and it's unique for one main reason. It shows Jesus when he's really young and has very short hair. Most images we have of him are when he's older, a little disheveled and with really long hair. But this picture basically shows him with a short perm. The painting is also unique because it's one of the only surviving images of Jesus from Israel's antiquity. The Byzantines had actually prohibited religious imagery. Most of the paintings of Jesus still around come from much more recently, from after the Byzantine Empire had fallen. Number 1. Raunchy Roman Graffiti. Ever since archaeologists started investigating the ancient Roman city of Pompeii, they've been finding graffiti on walls all throughout the city, the very same one that was decimated by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. There are scribblings left behind by the Romans. Some of this graffiti is shocking, to say the least. A lot of it is also extremely inappropriate, especially to those with Victorian sensibilities. Perhaps what's most surprising is just how relatable the ancient Roman graffiti in Pompeii is to the graffiti you might find at a modern bus stop or scrawled onto any bathroom stall. For example, archaeologists have uncovered flattering portrayals of local prostitutes etched into walls. They have found horrible insults aimed at people's enemies. They've even found angry phrases directed at politicians. And perhaps the most relatable thing of all, they have found the declarations of multiple people saying, "So-and-so was here." Your teenage self writing your name on walls was just carrying on the tradition from thousands of years ago. Before the eruption that preserved the city like a volcanic time capsule, graffiti was rampant. Most of it has faded away, but archaeologists have found remnants on pretty much everything. But among the crudely drawn pictures of reproductive organs and the mean things said about people's wives, archaeologists have also found rays of hope. Some graffiti was of a much more pleasant nature. For example, they found one piece of graffiti saying, "Health to you, Victoria, and wherever you are, may you sneeze sweetly." Clearly, the people of Pompeii had many complex layers. Another piece read, "Sanius to Cornelius, go hang yourself." Thanks for watching! What's your favorite discovery? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye!